All right, 2-7 is the next lesson that we are looking at. The topic here is polynomial long division. And so the first thing they give us is a polynomial. And so we can take a look at the graph of this thing. It's of degree 3. And judging by the graph, it says that, notice that x equals 2, okay, appears to be a 0 because of where it crosses. Okay? And so you know that x equals 2 is a 0 of the polynomial function, and x minus 2 then would be a factor. So that means that there exists a second degree polynomial, q of x, such that f of x equals x minus 2 times q of x, right? Because remember, if it's a 0, then it's also a factor. We learned that in a previous lesson. So to find q of x, you can use long division. In other words, if you divide the polynomial by its factor, then you would get this other q of x. So there's a division algorithm that we can look at here. It says if x and d of x are polynomials, such that d of x is not equal to 0 and the degree of d of x is less than or equal to the degree of the original polynomial, then there exist unique polynomials q of x and r of x. Okay, now remember, all these are polynomials, such that the f of x equals to d of x times q of x plus r of x. All right, so the original function f of x, so you've got d of x, okay, which is your divisor, so the factor that you're dividing into it. Q of x is the quotient, what's left after you divide it out, and then r of x, that would be your remainder if indeed there is one. All right, so where r of x equals 0, or the degree of r is less than the degree of d of x, and if the remainder r of x is 0, then you say that d of x divides evenly into r of x. All right, so polynomial long division is probably something you also did in Algebra 2, but let's just go through one and make sure. All right, so if I wanted to divide this out long ways, it says to divide this by this. So again, if you do it long ways, you can write out a long division sign just like you typically normally would. And I've got x minus 2 that I'm dividing into 6x to the third minus 19x squared plus 16x minus 4. Now, here's the key. In long division, you want to put up here what you can multiply this by to get this to disappear when you subtract it. So you're trying to multiply something here that would cause this first term to be the same as this term, because when you subtract them off, they'll disappear. So in other words, how can I make x into 6x to the third? Well, I would need to multiply it by 6x squared. All right, so 6x squared times x is 6x to the third. Okay? And then, of course, I've got another term here. Negative 2 times 6x squared is negative 12x squared. All right? So once you multiply that out, you want to change the sign because you're going to be subtracting that from the top. And the whole idea is to get this term to match so it will cancel out, and it does. Then I've got negative 19x squared plus 12x, and so that'll give me negative 7x squared. Then I'm ready to drop down the next term, which is plus 16x. And we can repeat the process again. How do I turn x into negative 7x squared? Well, I need to multiply it times negative 7x. So that'll be my next term in the quotient. So I'll go x times negative 7x, and then that's negative 7x squared. And then negative times a negative is a positive, right? So that'd be a plus, but I'm not going to write it because remember, we're going to switch it anyway here in just a minute. So negative, negative, positive, and 2 times 7 is 14x, so that'd be 14x. But remember, if it's positive, when you subtract it off, it's going to be negative, which means I probably should already go ahead and change this one as well to a plus. And now we can subtract these two off. Again, that disappears. 16x minus 14x is going to be left with 2x. and I'm going to drop my minus 4 down, and we're going to divide into it again. How do I turn x into 2x? Well, I need to multiply it times 2. And so 2 times x, 2x. Remember, when it drops in, it's going to change sign. I'll go ahead and do that. 2 times negative 2 is negative 4, but it's going to drop in as a plus 4 because remember, you're subtracting. And now that disappears to 0, and we have divided it out evenly. And then so there's the quotient right there. There's your answer. Okay? So we're just dividing these things out with long division. All right, here's another one. So I want to divide this by this. So I'll have 2x minus 1 dividing into 8x to the third. Now, here's the thing you got to be careful of. You got to really pay attention when you're dividing this out long ways to the powers. Okay? Even though it may not have a degree or a term of every power, in other words, it's got an x third, there's no x squared, there's no x, then there's just a regular number. Okay? Even though it doesn't have a term of every power there, we still have to account for it in the long division so that we can have the correct placeholders. So if there is no x squared term, you're going to write that as plus 0x squared to make sure that it lines up correctly. All right, and likewise for my x term, it's going to be plus 0x, and then we can have minus 1. Okay, so you want to make sure that you plug those in there as so that it divides out correctly as far as the places are concerned. If there is no squared term or no first power term, so you got to make sure that you have all the terms represented when you're dividing it out long division like this. So now we can go. So how do I turn 2x into 8x to the third? Well, I need to multiply it by 4x squared, and then that will turn it into, I'll go ahead and make it minus when I drop it in. Since it's positive, change it because you're going to be subtracting. So that's going to be 8x to the third, and it matches up nicely, exactly like we want. And then now positive times a negative is a negative, but when I subtract, it's going to change back to a positive, 4x squared. All right, that's gone. That's going to become 4x squared. I'm ready to drop in my plus 0x. And, oh man, I don't want that there, do I? What am I doing? I need to get that back off of there. There we go. All right, so now I want to try to turn 2x into 4x squared, and that's going to be done by multiplying by 2x. So 2x times 2x is 4x squared. And remember, when it drops in there, I'm going to be subtracting. And then positive times a negative is a negative, but when you subtract it, it's going to change back to a positive. 2x, and that's gone, and then that's going to be 2x. Now I got my minus 1 here on the end, and guess what? I just need to multiply that times 1, and it matches up and cancels out to 0, and we're done. So there you go. All right, so polynomial long division, like I say, probably something that you have experience with from your Algebra 2 class. Now, let's talk about what happens if it does not divide out evenly. Like, for example, in this next one, let's see what happens. Okay, I'm going to be dividing. So I'm going to divide x squared. May need to come down just a little bit to give myself a little more room here. So I'm going to come down to here, x squared plus 2x minus 3. Now I'm dividing that into, they have written this in ascending order of the variable. So when I write it out, I'm going to put it in standard form, which is descending order of the variable, to make it line up right when I divide. So make sure you notice that. So I'm going to go 2x to the fourth plus 4x to the third minus 5x squared plus 3x minus 2. All right? Now, when we go to write this one out, remember, even though it's a trinomial here, 3 terms, the idea is the same. I still want to make the first terms match so that they disappear when subtracted. So the question is, how do I turn x squared into 2x to the 4th? Well, I need to multiply by 2x squared. And then that would become positive. Positive is a positive, but when you subtract, I'll go ahead and make it minus 2x to the 4th. Then it matches up perfectly like I want. But I need to multiply the rest of it out too. So positive, positive is a positive, but subtracting it will make it a negative. And then that's going to be 4x to the 3rd. Okay. And so now we've got positive times a negative, which is a negative. And so that's going to change to a positive when I subtract it. And that's going to be 6x squared. All right, so let's subtract it off, see what happens. Gone, gone. And that's going to be x squared. Okay, now, here's the next thing to keep in mind. Since I'm multiplying out by a trinomial, 3 terms, I need 3 terms on every part of the division. So instead of just dropping down 1 term, I'm going to drop down 2 terms so I can divide it out. Okay, so now I need to ask, well, how do I make x squared equal to x squared? I just need to multiply it times 1. So when I do that, I've got minus x squared. Go ahead and change the sign. Then I've got positive 2x will change to a minus 2x. And minus 3 will change to a plus 3. And we drop that down. That's gone. This, however, is not gone. That's x plus 1. And so we're out of terms. So that is actually going to be your remainder. That's your remainder. And so how do I finish writing it correctly? I'm just going to have to add the remainder onto the end of this. But remember, when you go to add a remainder, okay, you're actually going to be adding the fraction back onto it. And so the way that we're going to write this out is that's going to be the remainder on top, x plus 1, over what you were dividing by, which is x squared plus 2x minus 3. So that's your actual full answer right there. So remember, whatever the remainder is when you're dividing out, you can put that on the top of the fraction, okay, and then divide that by what you were dividing by at first. Because think about it like this. What if you were going to do, let's see, what if you were going to do 11 divided by 2? 11 divided by 2. Well, we know that that's going to be what? 5.5, let's say. And so if I wanted to write it out as a remainder, then I divide it out, right? 2 divided by 11, and we get 5. 5 times 2 is 10. Subtract off, you got 1. Well, 1 is your remainder, right? Well, 5.5 is going to be the same as 5 plus 1/2. 5 plus 1/2 makes 5.5, right? And then so that's why you take the remainder and add it back over the fraction with the remainder on the top and what you divided by there on the bottom. All right? So let's take the notes that we've got here and see if we can't utilize that in getting our quiz finished.